Yesterday, we learned about Clara Barton. Clara Barton was a compassionate and caring woman who helped the wounded during the Civil War. She helped them by gathering medical supplies and treating them on the battlefields. Clara Barton was given the nickname the Angel of the Battlefield because she was so helpful to those wounded soldiers. After the Civil War, Clara Barton did something very important. She founded the American Red Cross. Today, we're going to learn a little bit more about President Lincoln and a very important document that he wrote. But first, let's go over some of the vocabulary words that we will see. Abolished. Abolished means stopped or ended. We've talked about the word abolished a little bit before. In the North, abolitionists wanted to abolish slavery or stop slavery. Right now, we are learning from home because school has been abolished for the rest of the year or stopped. I'm going to say a couple other examples of things that have or have not been abolished. The teacher said, "We will continue to go for a nature walk every week for the rest of the year." If the teacher said this, that means that weekly nature walks were not abolished. Sandy told her brother that he was no longer allowed to use the basketball in the house. That means that basketball in that house was abolished. The volleyball team raised enough money to play another season. If they're able to keep playing, that means that volleyball was not abolished. See if you can think of a time when you wanted something to be stopped or abolished. Cabinet. A cabinet is a group of people who give advice to the president. They are his advisors. For example, during President Lincoln's presidency, his cabinet helped him make many decisions. Scroll. A scroll is a rolled piece of parchment or paper. Proclamation. A proclamation is an official announcement. Today, we are going to read about an important proclamation that Lincoln made. Emancipation. Emancipation is the act of releasing or setting free. So abolitionists wanted emancipation for the enslaved Africans in the South. "Gathering closer, closer everyone," the soldier cried out. The people gathered beneath a massive, or very large, oak tree. It was a bitter cold day in January 1863. A boy named Samuel, age 10, and his sister Violet, age 7, squeezed and prodded their way through the crowd. "Let's keep going to the front," Samuel said, tugging Violet's hand. "No, let's stay here in the middle where it's warm," said Violet, thankful to have so many bodies pressed close around to shield her from the freezing January wind. "Fine, you stay here, but I'm going up front so I can hear," said Samuel. "You don't even know what he's going to talk about," Violet said, as her brother wormed his way toward the tree. Finally, Violet gave in and followed her brother to the very front. There, a Union soldier wearing a long, heavy blue coat held a scroll, a rolled piece of paper, which was sealed with a red wax stamp. "What is it? Some kind of news?" asked a woman in the crowd. "What happened? What's on that piece of paper?" asked another. "Honestly, I do not know," the soldier answered. "My commander handed me this scroll and ordered me to come up to the tree and read it. So that is what I'm doing." Take a minute to make a prediction. What do you think the scroll will say? The tree where the people were gathering was in a place called Hampton, Virginia. Hampton was different than other places in Virginia, mainly because nearby Fort Monroe was still under Union control. Unlike Fort Sumter and so many other forts controlled by the Confederates, the Union still held Fort Monroe, so the Union soldiers also controlled the nearby port and town. During the war, many escaped slaves had come to Fort Monroe, hoping to be safe from slave catchers. Eventually, a community of free African Americans had sprung up around the town of Hampton, and that is why, on this day in 1863, a large group of free African Americans were gathering under the giant oak tree in Virginia to listen to a Union soldier. Samuel and Violet had been born into slavery, but their parents had managed to escape at the beginning of the war, and they had been living in Hampton ever since. "Quiet," the soldier called. "Quiet, please." When everyone was settled, the soldier read the first words. "By the President of the United States of America, a proclamation." So this is going to be an official announcement from President Lincoln. Let's find out what it says. The soldier waited a moment. Everyone knew right away that they were about to hear something very important. It was not every day that the president sent out written proclamations. The soldier continued reading. "Whereas, on the 22nd day of September, in the year of our Lord 1862, a proclamation was issued by the President of the United States, containing, among other things, the following, to wit." "What did he just say?" Violet asked eagerly, tugging on Samuel's sleeve. "I'm not really sure," he replied. "I think it was just a fancy way of saying the date. I think. Now just hush and listen." So the date was September 22nd, 1862. The soldier read some more. "That on the first day of January, all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state shall be thenceforward, and forever free." The crowd erupted in gasps of joy and relief. "Read that again," someone shouted, interrupting the soldier. "I want to make sure I heard you right." Everyone in the crowd had been enslaved at one time, so they were very happy to hear that President Lincoln was proclaiming an end to slavery. Samuel and Violet listened to the rest of it, but when it was over, Violet did not really understand most of what she had heard. "So does this mean that we don't have to worry about being captured by the slave catchers anymore?" she asked Samuel. "I think so," Samuel answered, rubbing his chin. "I think President Lincoln said all slaves are now free, but I'm not really sure. We'll have to ask Mother what it all means." The document the soldier read was called the Emancipation Proclamation. So remember, emancipation is the act of setting something or someone free, and a proclamation is an official announcement. So the Emancipation Proclamation was an official announcement that all enslaved people would now be free. It is one of the most famous documents in the history of the United States, but it did not do exactly what you might think, at least not right away. Unfortunately, President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation did not automatically free all the enslaved people. In fact, it did not even say that all slaves should be free, only that the enslaved people in states that were still fighting against the Union should be free. So the states that are fighting against the Union were called the Confederacy. Some states, including Maryland and Delaware, still had slavery, but they had not seceded from the Union. Lincoln allowed people in states that had not seceded to keep their slaves as long as they continued to fight on the side of the Union. Eventually, slavery was abolished by law in all of the states, but not just because of the Emancipation Proclamation. On this map of the United States during this time, the states that are colored gray were states that were part of the Confederacy. The states that are colored blue were part of the Union. The green states in the middle were slaveholding states that were in the Union, and they were not affected by the Emancipation Proclamation. Slavery was a major reason that the nation was divided in the first place, but the reason President Lincoln declared war was that the Confederacy broke national law by seceding from the Union. Remember, to secede means to leave. In other words, in the beginning, the war was not about ending slavery, but about keeping the nation whole. The Emancipation Proclamation changed this. The Emancipation Proclamation changed the focus and purpose of the war at a time when things were not going well for the Union. This was before the Battle of Gettysburg, which took place in July 1863. The Union had not won many battles, yet tens of thousands of men were already dead or wounded, and there was no end in sight to the war. So although the Emancipation Proclamation changed the war, it didn't end the war. Many people, including his closest advisors, told President Lincoln to end the war and let the Confederacy have its way. This picture shows Lincoln just having read the Emancipation Proclamation to his cabinet, or group of advisors. Some thought it was a good idea, and some did not, but President Lincoln did what he knew was the right thing to do. The Emancipation Proclamation let everyone know that President Lincoln was not only determined to preserve or save the Union, he also wanted to make sure that slavery would never cause another war. This made the abolitionists very happy, and after that, they put their full support behind President Lincoln and the war. Remember, the abolitionists were people who wanted to abolish or end slavery. The Emancipation Proclamation also allowed free African Americans and escaped slaves to fight for the Union. The famous abolitionist Frederick Douglass helped recruit African Americans. So to help recruit means that he encouraged them to join the Union Army as soldiers. Many African Americans did join the Union Army and fought courageously. African American men and women were eager to help the Union Army in other ways too. Men worked as carpenters, cooks, guards, laborers, and boat pilots. African American women were devoted nurses, spies, and scouts. In this way, men and women who had never been enslaved, as well as former enslaved Africans, courageously worked together to save the Union and bring freedom to the slaves in the South. This statue, called the Spirit of Freedom, stands today at the African American Civil War Memorial in Washington, D.C., to honor the more than 200,000 African American soldiers who served the United States during the Civil War. From that day forward, the great oak tree in Hampton, Virginia, became known as the Emancipation Oak. It was the first place the Emancipation Proclamation was read on Confederate territory. After the Emancipation Proclamation, the United Army freed enslaved people each time it won a battle and took control of a town or some farmland in a southern state. Little by little, one plantation at a time, slavery in the United States was finally coming to an end.